looking at now is we're thinking about the second idea that we had for this class, which was Marty McFly. Marty McFly, of course, Back to the Future. What's that got to do with grammar? Well, think about it. We've been talking, and I keep mentioning this idea of we're in the present, we're in the present, we're in the simple present. And what's very important to think about with verbs, and last week what I said was, in English, verbs hold huge amounts of information. So they're telling us what is happening in our sentence, they're telling us when, this is important, they're a reflection of who, and they're also telling us how, which is for a different class. The when is really what we're going to think about now, the when and the who, possibly together. So, if you think about what we've been looking at so far is taking a verb, changing the person, and sometimes that changes what the verb looks like, either to an S sound or changes it to a different word. So now what we have to consider is taking verbs and moving them in time, because you don't always want to talk about things in the present simple tense, and this is where it starts getting a little bit more complex, but it's still important. So if you think about the sentence that we had last week, I said, I work at AMH. If I wanted to take that idea and put it into the past, for example, 20 years ago, I could say I worked in Dublin 20 years ago. So what's happened to my verb? Okay. So what we have is I work at AMH. Put it into the past, I worked in Dublin. So you can hear the difference, and you should also be able to see the difference. Basically what we have here is we've taken the verb work and we've added on ed. So this is our verb, and you're just adding on this little suffix here, this little block. It's like Lego. And what you end up with is the verb to work in the past. Okay, so it's time traveling. It's taking us back in time as soon as your verb changes. Now for regular verbs, this ed, this little block ed, is very common. So I work, I worked. I start, I started. The ed, as soon as you click that onto your verb, it takes you back in time. So what about our irregular verbs? What happens there? Basically, if we think about, first of all, the verb to be. Now remember we said, just get my pen here, that the verb to be in the present changes very dramatically. So we have I am, for example. Today I am happy. Okay. If I wanted to put that into the past, what's it going to look like? So instead of I am, it would need to be I was happy. Now what you can see is traveling back in time with this verb, which we said is very irregular, basically does whatever it wants. The word that we're using here in the present has completely changed. So the verb in the present is I am. When you move into the past, the verb to be is was. Okay, so that's really important. Now let's look at all the other people, because of course with I am we also had you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, they are, and that's in the present simple. Okay, here. If we move back in time, what's it going to look like? I was, you were. Okay, so again, it's another different word. Remember, this is in the past. And the word were takes us there. Okay, so I was happy, you were happy, he was happy, she was happy, it was happy, we were happy, they were happy. So what you can see here is that you've got basically two different words to reflect time using the verb to be. So the was and the were take us into the past. Okay. All right, nearly there. The other verb that we looked at, the other irregular verb that I mentioned, was the verb to have. So again, what we've got is the verb to have in the present. I have, you have, he has, she has, it has, we have, they have. Okay. Now into the past, what's that going to look like? I had. And again, it's a completely different word here we've got. So it's I had, you had, he had, she had, it had, we had, and they had. So again, what we've done is we've moved this verb into the past, and this word had, which actually stays the same for all different people. You can see it in this list. The verb to have changes to had for everybody, and it's a reflection of what you're trying to say in the sentence, but also it's a reflection of time. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here, this idea of time in these irregular verbs, and these verbs that do their own thing. Now there are lots and lots of irregular verbs. The majority of verbs, we have to say, are regular, which is a good thing. So that's our ED block, locking on. But irregular verbs are the ones you really have to make more of an effort to practice so that you can learn them, and also to spell them, because the spelling can be pretty tricky at times. Now had is fairly reasonable kind of spelling, but there are other verbs, of course, which are a little bit more complicated when it comes to spelling. So let's have a look at those for a moment. And what we can say is a common verb that you might want to use is the verb to buy. Okay, so I buy my groceries in Tesco, but last week I bought. Yeah, so I bought my groceries in Lidl, for example. Now, buy and bought, you can see very, very different words, and a lot more complicated spelling here. Silent letters, kind of strange. That idea of that connection between spelling and sound in English isn't always as obvious. In other languages, it's a lot easier to connect together spelling and sound, but in English it can be tricky. So you need to be really careful of the spelling of these words in English. So I buy, he buys, she buys, it buys. That's our present, remember, with our he, she, or it, and our s. We move into the past. What does that look like? I bought, you bought, he bought, she bought, it bought, we bought, they bought. Everybody's the same, which is a good thing. So you only have to, if you're moving this verb to buy into the past, you only have to remember this one word, which is good. But you also have to be careful with the spelling, because that's going to be the tricky part as far as this one's concerned. So that's the verb to buy. Another common verb that you might want to just be careful with is the verb to catch. So catch, of course, in the present, I catch, he catches. There's a little spelling change there, but you've got that S sound. But move it into the past and what happened. So I catch the football, I caught. And again, the spelling is the bit that's going to be tricky here. Now, just be very, very careful, because actually bought and caught sound very similar to each other, apart from that first letter. But you can see that the spelling is different. Bought with an O and caught with an A. Don't ask me why. Listen, if I go into telling you why, it's going to be history and linguistics and all sorts of nonsense. There's nothing we can do about the spelling system. We're just going to have to live with it. So do your best. Just focus on trying to learn those. And if you're still finding it difficult, remember there's always dictionaries and your phone, and asking other people as well that can help out. But spelling is really tricky, so don't stress too much about it. Really, there's no point. Okay, other verbs that I'd like you to think about. We can do this now, sort of as we're here. I'm going to put these up on the board now. I just want you to think of at home how you would put them in the past. So the verbs that I chose were sleep. What does that look like in the past? Swim, teach, think, and read. Okay, so those are our verbs. I just want you to think about now what those are going to look like in the past, because they all change. So what we had first was sleep. So that would of course change to slept. Okay, slept. Swim. So I swim would change to yesterday I swam. Okay. I teach. Last week I taught. Just be careful of the spelling there. You'll notice the similar sound to caught and bought, but just be careful. Lots of silent letters in that one as well. And again with the next one, which is a very common verb, I think, I thought. Okay, so and I read. Yesterday I read. Now this last one is kind of interesting. If you listen to the difference in sound, what we have is I read. That's present simple. Put it into the past. I read. Read, read. So the sound is different, but what do you notice about the spelling? Two words look exactly the same. That's not very helpful. But what we have to remember is that these are just two words on a board. Where you're going to find these words are in sentences, in context, as we would say. So if you see a sentence that says, this word, books every day, then you know what you're talking about. That's not the past. Every day, okay? It's going to be the present simple. If you see a sentence that begins with yesterday or 10 years ago or when I was a child, then you know you're in the past, and how you're going to say this word would change. So it would no longer be I read, it would be I read, like the colour red. But the spelling stays the same. So that's the tricky part about English. As we said, there are some rules, like our regular verbs, where you're adding s's with he, she in it, or you're adding eds to go into the past. But there are also lots of exceptions. So with your rebel verbs, with your James Deans, they change sometimes dramatically when you're using he, she, or it, and even more dramatically if you send them into the past. The sound changes, spelling changes. It can be kind of tricky to figure out what's going on. It's all about practice, of course, right? So what I'd like you to do, and what I'm going to put up on the screen now is a short little paragraph, and the paragraph is all in the present simple. Okay, so that means it's starting here in time. Right? And what I'd like you to do is to put the whole paragraph into the past. Now, the easiest way to do this might be just to pause the film at the particular part when I put up the screen. Either write down the answer as you're looking at the present bit on the screen. You can put all the verbs into the past, or you can take a screenshot, or you can take a photograph of the screen, or something like that. And basically, then you can either send it to me, you can email it to me, or I'll be putting up the answer next week, and we can kind of have a look at what's happened to all of those verbs. Now, this is a mixture, I'll have to say, there's a mixture in this passage that you're going to see in a moment of regular, so those are our verbs, and irregular, those are our James Dean, so those are the ones that do whatever they want. If you're not sure of any verb, what you can do, again, read out the sentence, because most of these verbs, I mean, actually, all of these verbs that I picked are very common verbs. So what that means is your ear will sometimes give you the right grammatical answer, because if you've been using and listening to English over and over and over again for years, what happens is your brain will have caught on to the correct sound in a sentence. So read out those sentences, think about what sounds correct to you, and write that down. If you're not sure of the spelling, or you're not sure of the past tense at all, you can go and look in a dictionary. If it doesn't tell you what the past tense is, so for example, if you looked up the verb start and you wanted to figure out what it is in the past, it won't tell you. And it won't tell you because it's regular. So you're just going to stick ed onto it. However, if you look up in a dictionary the verb catch, it will say catch, and after it, very closely after it, what you'll see is it will say the word caught. So if the word is strange or different, it will tell you in the dictionary. If it's one of those regular ones, it won't tell you. So that's just a little tip. So that's your homework. Again, if you have any questions, if you want to kind of write in, if you have anything you want me to look at, please just email me or talk to your key worker and they can pass on the message. But hopefully this will build on what we looked at last week and give you a little bit more insight into what verbs do. Okay. So next week we're going to continue with verbs, but we're going to be looking at strong verbs and weaker verbs when it comes to meaning, which will be quite interesting. So hopefully I'll see you all, or at least you'll see me, next week. Bye!